a career in television in the late 90s. I mean, the internet is cool and all, but it's still way too slow to ever compete with 200 TV channels. Right? I relate. Me at the same time. Learning printing. Our factory's biggest contracts were for making maps, newsletters for organizations, flyers, phone books, TV guide and magazines. Nobody's ever gonna stop needing those. Right? LMAO. Oof. All things that are now in a box that fit in your pocket. So I was in Uganda with my family, and we see a large, about 5 feet tall, curled up leaf hanging about 8 feet off the ground. We're told that these leaves curl up and fall out the trees, and they're pretty heavy, so it can be dangerous to have it fall on you. My dad and I think, won't it be helpful of us to get this thing down? So we're there whacking it with sticks, trying to get it down. To no avail. When my dad says, "Hey, climb up on that wall there, son, and jump. Grab it and then pull it down." Double quote. Well, that sounds like a swell idea, Dad. So I do just that. I don't manage to get it all the way down, but as soon as I hit the ground, I get this burning sensation in my elbow. Turns out there's a hive of Ugandan mud wasps living in this specific leaf, and they do not take kindly to young men trying to tug their home down. So I'm just sprinting back to the office where the rest of my family is sheltered from the sun, and I practically have 2 elbows on one arm at this point, while, as my dad described it later, an army of large black blots give chase. I make it back inside and my arm is numb, except for the searing pain in my elbow. Thankfully, there was no further reaction. The pain lasted only around 3 hours and the swelling was down by the end of the day. That being said, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. Even worse than the time I broke my arm into 3 pieces while arm wrestling. When I was 15, my best friend and I just got new BB pistols. They were the Walther CP99. Looked identical to the real Walther CP9 with a removable magazine and no orange tip. We were playing with them in the backseat of his mom's car. They weren't loaded. We were just excited and wanted to take them out of the box. She knew we had them out and didn't think anything of it. This was the late 90s BTW. Before going back to his house, she went through the drive-thru at Burger King. You know where this is going. She's ordering food with 2 large 15-year-olds holding guns and pointing them at everything. Fast forward 30 minutes. We are pulling into their driveway and his dad comes running out of the house yelling hysterically. One of his friends just called and said he heard on the police scanner that they were looking for his vehicle with 2 white males holding a female hostage at gunpoint. Few minutes later, several police cars pull in the driveway, jump out with guns out, making everyone get on the ground. It took some explaining on his dad's part about us being a bunch of dumbasses. 15-year-old me couldn't figure out what all the fuss was about, but 34-year-old me looks back and realizes that might be the dumbest thing I have ever done. I let my 14-year-old cousin at the time try driving the family car. I was like 18 back then or 20, and I told him it's easy to drive an automatic car. Basically like driving a go-kart. Told him gas was right and brakes were center. I forgot to mention that changing the gear to D will automatically have the car move. We both panicked and hit a F-king tree in front of us at probably 1 mile per hour. Luckily we were in our neighborhood by a dead end. Lol. My dad got out of the car one time and left it running when I was like 5. So this was 95 feet or 96 feet. He literally just put it in park, got out, left the door open, and was rummaging through the trunk for something while parked on a very private side street. It was very slightly downhill. Me, being 5, hops over into the driver's seat, puts it in drive, still not sure how I did it, and reached the brakes. I don't remember that much, and the car just starts moving. I panicked as much as my dad. And I'll never forget just freezing as I see him just jump, take 3 massive strides, throw me in the passenger seat and hit the brake. Hey, you know those degenerates who you stay out drinking with until sunrise every other day? Why don't you live with them for the last 2 years of law school? That won't cause any issues at all. Double quote. Q 2 years of abuse to my body and liver and more than a little strain between me and my friends at the time. Overall it was fun. But definitely not a good idea. Yo, I did this too. If you make friends with the party people in your dorm, don't move in with them after first year. Move in with the studious people in your dorm. But go party with your party friends once in a while. Your home life will be quiet and conducive to studying and your party friends will stay friends. It's real hard to stay friends with those people when you live with them because they can be incredibly selfish and inconsiderate because partying comes first and your studies sleep job come last always. Moving in with my girlfriend. I f'd up. It's a disaster that I should have seen coming. Please tell me more. I am considering moving in with mine soon. My mistakes were so basic it stings to even type it out. Make sure you know yourself and how you react to situations you'll be getting into. And if there are any red flags in you hear the relationship, pay attention to them. I made another comment with more detail about my dumbness if you want to peruse that. Playing sled dog with my newly rescued husky and a longboard on the hilly streets near my house in college. Snapped my right forearm in half and had to walk a mile back home to get a ride to the hospital. Being roommates with someone I had a huge crush on. It didn't end well. Friend-zoned? Marizo, that person turned out to be an abusive manipulator who had complete disregard for my feelings, well-being, and possessions. I thought they were my best friend. And I eventually figured out the hard way they were not. It wasn't just me. This individual pretty much used people as playthings and disposed of them when they weren't getting any more entertainment or validation from them. They were super toxic. It took me a long time to heal from what I went through. In the end though, I'm grateful for the lessons I learned. Me and my friend used to play a game where we threw a Swiss Army knife up in the air at nighttime and then ran away from it. With the knife part out. We did similar with a potato gun. We had it rigged so you could slap the bottom and that would ignite it. So we shot potatoes up in the air like mortars at night and ran until we heard the thud of it hitting the ground again. I had a pretty gnarly bruise one time from when we decided to have a naval battle with potato guns when I was maybe 15. We were at a friend's lake house. We went to Walmart and bought a bunch of cheap inflatable rafts with paddles. They were definitely not made for 2 people. But we had one gunner and one rower on each raft. The gunners pretty quickly learned you could skip the potatoes off the water and have a better chance of hitting something. Got hit in the back by a chunk of skipping potato from like 50 yards off. Hurt like a bitch. Honestly, the naval battle part was a ton of fun. We should have just done it with paintballs and masks instead of potato guns. When I was a kid I tried to ride my bike up the trunk of a tree so I could kick off and try to land it and it'd be really cool. Turns out a tree trunk is rounded and so you'll just slip off the trunk and hit your head on the tree. My brother still gives me shit about trying to ride my bike up a tree. Please say you were in your 20s when this happened. Unfortunately no. I was about 8 or 9. In high school, my friend discovered that he was particularly agile at running toward a wall and kicking off of it into a backflip. He would do this all day. Every day. Before school. At lunch. Etc. One day we were inside a classroom and the teacher had stepped out for a moment. Of course he took this opportunity to try his little trick. He didn't, however, take into account the fact that drywall might not support his weight as well as the brick and concrete walls he'd tried before. His leg ended up busting straight through the wall to the other side. Into a classroom full of students taking an exam. So I wasn't actually in the class taking the exam. But to this day, I still imagine how strange and hilarious it would be to be sitting in that class then suddenly see a leg burst through the wall. Makes me smile just thinking about it. Reminds me of a time I was in high school. We had 2 different lunch periods so some people were in class while others were in lunch. We were allowed to go outside on days when it was nice so we took this opportunity to play some frisbee. Well, an unexpected breeze came along and took the frisbee off course and perfectly through a 3rd floor window and hit a kid taking an exam. I always chuckle thinking of everyone quietly taking a test safely inside the classroom when out of nowhere bam. Worst part was the teacher wouldn't toss us back the frisbee. For a film like Class, we needed to record a large variety of sounds with our sound recorders. I like the sloshing sound of my water bottle, and was curious how it would sound if it was flipped. To do this, I flipped the water bottle and tried to record the sound it made. Well, the bottle hit the ground, the cap came off, and water spilled everywhere. It got my notes wet, my shoes wet, my friend wet. I didn't know there was so much water in that bottle. I didn't even get a good sound out of it. I've told this story before, but when I was 16 I was going through the emo punk phase and I decided one day that I wanted to put colored streaks in my hair. So, I went to Walgreens and bought a semi-permanent red dye for dark hair, because I had no idea how to bleach my hair. I get home, apply the dye and think I'm going to look so awesome that it'll be worth it if my parents get pissed. I had no idea what I was doing and instead of ending up with red streaks thought my hair I ended up with a huge red splotch at the top of my head because all dye clumped together or something. It looked terrible and was no longer worth getting in trouble for. The next morning I see my mom and she takes one look at my hair and bursts into laughter and tells me, "Whoa, you really f***ed that up, didn't you?" She wasn't mad. She thought it was hilarious and after a bit of teasing she went to Walgreens and got me a box of black hair dye so I could cover it up and not have to go outside looking like that. Summer camp one year. Everyone was getting in barrels to roll down this giant hill. It seemed like tons of fun so I hopped in one and down I went. Well, the whole time it felt like I was being beaten up by the ground. And I was bruised pretty much from head to toe with a few cuts and scrapes too. Being a young teen I of course had to act tough and like it was awesome. But it really was not awesome. I thought I was maybe just a wimp or did it wrong. But looking back it definitely seems it was a dare type thing everyone wanted to prove they were tough enough for. I'm guessing many more than just me had the thought of well, that wasn't fun. Making bows and arrows with my friends when I was around 13. To ensure that the arrows got stuck in some tree or whatnot, we duct taped 80mm nails at their ends. Then we went shooting around the nearby field with complete disregard of others' positions. I did not take an arrow to the knee, but to the palm of my hand. Remembering the friend saying to the other no worries, I won't hit him. Luckily nothing serious came from that. Dating a girl that had a crush on me. Didn't know her all that well beforehand other than that she was relatively quiet and an outsider at school. Relationship eventually ended because I wouldn't let her tie me up and put a knife to my throat during sex. Zero issues with the tying me up part. But the knife was a deal breaker. She did a presentation that compared some hentai shit to the Bible in our religious instruction class a few weeks after we broke up. The teacher actually let her show a few minutes of a hentai movie before intervening. In college a large group of us hiked up to this abandoned mine shaft at night. Took turns squeezing through a small crack in the mountain. The main entrance was closed off. Walked down a long dark corridor with our flashlights. Then set up a campfire in one of the large clearings at the end and proceeded to get wasted. All fun and games until a rather large girl got too drunk and couldn't walk on her own. Getting her out of there was a whole f***ed up ordeal. Thought a few times during the process that we were going to have to leave her there in the dark and go get help. Especially when my flashlight started to die. When I was working in retail for the first time I was hired with 3 other people as seasonal employees for Black Friday and holiday season and towards the end of the day, they would send us to go bring in any shopping carts buggies that were outside and usually we would have to push it in ourselves because we didn't have one of those machines that would push it for you and someone suggested why don't we just make one huge cart line and push it in instead of having 4 different lines and everyone agreed so we get everything and lined up about 60-70 something carts took 3 of us to push it as it was so heavy. And the other guy guiding it at the front. We managed to get inside the store and into the cart area but being a whole line and heavy-ish tea we couldn't stop it in time so it blew past the rail and unfortunately on the other side of the cart area is where we kept the dishwashers, refrigerators, TVs that are supposed to be going out for delivery sold. We ended up breaking a TV and denting a fridge. Unfortunately, the store manager was doing his night rounds around the store and saw the whole thing as he was coming down the main hall. We got yelled at pretty bad and immediately just told us to go home and to see him in his office tomorrow morning. It seemed like a good idea though. Lol. On a rainy day, I saw a hitchhiker near the university asking for a ride. He looked the part of a student. Although I never pick up hitchhikers, I felt sorry for him standing in the rain and gave him a lift. It felt like the right thing to do at the time. He told me where he was headed, so I went out of my way to drive him there. The guy just kept staring at me and said very little. When we arrived at his destination, he wouldn't get out of my car, no matter what. Finally, when a police officer came along, I told him to hop out or I'd call the cop over for help. That ended it. But if the officer hadn't come by, I have no idea what might have happened. Close bracket. When I was a teenager, my brother, cousin, and a couple of friends decided to try to steal a Coke vending machine by tipping it over into the back of a Ford Ranger pickup and take off. We were like, "Shit, we'll just put it in our garage and have plenty of soda and we'll refill it." We had one of those keys for them. It was 2 in the morning and we're all wasted. This was mid-90s mind you and way out in the country. There was a little store with the machine. We backed up and my brother and I got it rocking back and forth and finally balled into the back of the truck. It lifted the front end of the truck off the ground and as soon as it landed in the bed my buddies started hauling ass with me trying to jump into the bed with the vending machine and my brother hopped on the back of the vending machine riding it like a majestic horse. But we forgot to unplug it and for some reason it was just enough that it pulled the machine out the truck with my brother on it and crashed to the ground. We were young, dumb, and bored as hell. But it made perfect sense to me then. My BFF and I were at a party and didn't really know anyone. We went to the bathroom together as girls do and spotted a pair of electric hair clippers. This was 2007 and Jackass was huge. Bam Margera was famous for sneaking up on people and clipping a chunk of hair off at the scalp. We looked at each other, said Bam does it, and we did it to each other. We both had long hair, but we were smart enough to do it underneath by the noses of our necks. We could hear people all night in the bathroom yelling, "Where did this hair come from?" We woke up the next morning, hella hungover and forgot what we had done. I went to put my hair up in a ponytail and I touched the shaved spot and screamed at the top of my lungs. It all came flashing back. And as I reached for my cell phone to call her, she was calling me and I answered to her hysterically screaming, "What did we do last night?" After that, we adopted the phrase "it seemed like a good idea at the time" whenever we had other brilliant drink ideas. Fun times. I used to bike to school to save on gas but I often got chased by loose dogs on country roads. So I bought an air pistol to defend myself if they tried to bite me. PS an air pistol won't seriously injure a dog if you ping it in the hindquarters and I was a pretty good shot. Anyway, one day I got to school and someone saw me stashing the pistol in my bag after locking my bike up and called 911 and the whole place got put on lockdown while it got sorted out. I made the front page of the local paper and got a violation ticket, $50, for bringing a projectile firing device onto an educational campus. I was hiding parts of someone's saxophone during a band camp. For example, one day I took her saxophone out of the case, hid the saxophone, and put the case back. The final time I did it I hid her mouthpiece on a cabinet edge. She saw me do it, and tried to jump and get it. All she did was knock it forward into a 7-foot hole on the sides of the cabinets in the band room. There are 7-foot holes because the cabinets don't touch the wall and there is empty space there. The mouthpiece was $300 and if I couldn't get it out, I would have to pay. Luckily my friends helped me the next day and we were able to get it out using a walking stick. Happened 2 years ago. And X200B. I had just gotten a new BMX and was out riding with my friend as usual. I was about to jump off a fairly easy ledge and ended up going off the wrong side with my front wheel, tripping over myself and completely tearing my ACL, ripping a muscle in 3 different places and nearly breaking my kneecap. Ended up in physical therapy for nearly a year and can still feel my knee being loose when I wiggle my leg. 12/10 would not recommend. And X200B. TLDR. Bought a new BMX. An hour later F-ked my knee beyond reason. Haven't ridden a lot since. Actually. Happened to me last week. I was at Boy Scout camp. And due to the very little light pollution that state forests provide, the stars were absolutely beautiful that night. Some of the other scouts had gone to take a long exposure shot of the stars and galaxies you could see. I decided to join them. And when I looked up at the sky, it was absolutely stunning. Then, realizing that this beautiful moment happens in every teenage film, where they lie on the ground and look up the stars, proceed to yell, "This is a epic movie bucket list moment." And instead of just lying down slowly and spreading myself out, I took the quickest way I knew possible. I yeeted myself up in the air and spread out all my limbs, snow angel style, and just fell. Only once I was in the air did I realize that I should have braced my head. So, yeah, I have a concussion now. Boo, I can say the stars were amazing in that brief moment in which I was in the air. And I have one less item on my bucket list. Also, I am 6 feet 4 inches. And it was downhill. Close bracket. A couple of years ago, I was given a bag of Reese's peanut butter cups, the miniature ones that are individually wrapped in foil. We have a fridge in our garage that is mostly used to hold beer. It's a side by side with the freezer on one side. It's not hooked up for water and the ice maker. I thought it would be the most awesome idea ever to dump the bag of Reese's cups into the bin in the freezer for holding loose ice cubes. So, that way when you push the button on the outside of the door, a delicious chilled chocolate and peanut butter treat would be dispensed right into your hand. I dumped the whole bag in and I shut the door. Very excited to test it out and proud of my idea, I hit the button for the dispenser and whoosh. All of them came tumbling out onto the floor. Dummy me wasn't thinking how ice cubes get dispensed from there. It's always more than one and they'd probably be bigger. 2. I had to scramble and pick them all up off the floor because my dog thought he was going to get some freebie treats. Man, I was really bummed that my idea didn't work out. When I was 5 or 6 years old, my dad had a pickup truck. I got the idea that as he was backing out, I'd hide behind it and then jump into the bed of his truck to surprise him. My best friend, a 5-year-old from next door, decided she also wanted to try jumping in with me. Thankfully someone else saw what was going on and stopped us. I had this sergeant. She's 4 feet 9 inches and stocky. She used to be in really good shape in the regular army, but desk life in the reserves, plus some other stuff, made her real stocky. And I'm a huge nerd who likes D&D and went to the movies for all 3 Hobbit movies. And all that. So, it seemed like a good idea at the time, a real compliment. Honest. When I compared her to a token-esque dwarf, she, however, did not take that as a compliment. When I was like 12 and should have known better, I had a severe sore throat and had a hard time swallowing anything without pain. So, genius that I was, I decided the only way to deal was to swallow hot candle wax. Because if the wax dries and coats my throat, when I swallow I won't feel stuff hitting the sides of my throat and hurting. It actually worked surprisingly well. But drinking hot wax from a candle isn't particularly pleasant to do, so I don't think I'm doing that again. I was 7. Couldn't swim. Wore a life jacket. And my dad and his friend decided we should go tubing water skiing on the friend's speedboat on the Mississippi, up by Iowa. For my turn, my dad laid down on the inner tube and I laid on his back like a little monkey, with my arms around his neck. The friend told me, when I felt brave enough, to make a snake motion with my hand and they'll take me over the wake. I got brave fast. Made the snake motion. Hit the first wave and wee. First wake and I fly off into the river. I bobbed right back up and my dad had jumped off and swam over to me. But my husband still wonders how I survived childhood. Got one of those handless Segway things for Christmas when I was younger. They were the popular trend at the time, so of course I needed one. Christmas Day comes around and I got the Segway, so I was over the moon, but I remember seeing this video where people would sit down on the Segway and spin around really fast somehow. So while I was in my grandparents' house showing off what it could do, I decided I'd try the trick. I just assumed that when you sat down on it, it span around. So when I did sit down on it, it started spinning but slowly stopped and immediately started reversing, and I went straight into the stand that holds my grandparents' TV. The TV stand was glass, so you can probably imagine what happened. Getting married at 19. We had a kid, decided to make it official, stated married for 18 years while he cheated, gave me an STD and was a raging alcoholic. Yeah. Not a good idea. I relate to this so much. Got pregnant at 18. Had my son at 19. Married at 19. But divorcing at 23. We were together for 5 years, dating plus marriage, before we decided to divorce. He was an abusive alcoholic who legit almost killed me by not taking me to the hospital. Horrible idea in retrospect. If I could go back, I would have left him after I found out I was pregnant. He was the biggest waste of my time and the biggest mistake I've ever made. Not my child, so he's the best thing in my life. But ex-husband? No. Not at all.